Hello, it's the Eurogamer.net podcast, number 97. I'm Tom Champion, and joining me today, two very special guests. He's hardly a guest at this point. It's nicest man in video games, Christian Donlan.
Hello, everyone.
Hi, Chris. How are you doing?
Very well, thank you. How are you?
I feel good. I'm admiring your beard.
Oh, thank you. Yes, it's a new addition, but I'm pretty pleased with it.
First Martin Robinson, now Ollie Welsh.
Has Ollie Welsh got a beard as well?
Yeah, since he's been away.
Really? Wow. Okay, that's quite exciting.
I have not seen him since last week, so he may have got rid of it.
He's a man of mystery. That's how he rolls.
He is. He's an enigma. And joining us for the first time is Graham McAllister. Graham's the founder of a video games playtesting and user experience studio called Player Research.
Very good description. Thanks, Tom.
Oh yeah, I took that directly from your Twitter.
Oh, right, okay.
So, I hope it was. I hope it was good. So we're going to spend this podcast talking a bit about what it is that Graham's company does. And what he means by user experience, essentially, and usability in games, essentially. So, do you want to start by just kind of expanding on that idea of what user experience is and what usability in games is?
I think one of the problems is there's so many terms for it. So, I think in my Twitter feed is used quite accurately, borrowed. It says usability and it says user experience.
Yeah.
But probably the real name for it is user research.
Right, okay.
But then you have in the industry, people will talk about playtesting or focus tests, or focus groups. And it's like, man, where does the term stop? You know, so the reason I've usability and user experience is to try and cover everything. I'll try and explain a little bit. But basically, what we do is we work with developers when they're making the game throughout the whole development cycle.
Right, okay.
And we bring people in, normal gamers, casual gamers, depends what they want, and we get them to play their game before it hits the shelves. So we study their behaviour and say, what are they doing? What do they like? Why is that? Which is obviously an important question.
Yeah. And
you feedback that stuff to the developer, and hopefully they make it better.
Okay.
So that's more or less what we do.
Cool. So is this not something that devs and publishers do of their own accord? Why is it that they necessarily come to you? Is this not part of kind of like the QA process or something?
Yeah, so there's another term you can throw in, QA.
Yeah.
While we're at it, market research, okay, let's throw that one in as well. So those terms are sometimes confused with playtesting or user research. But we deal specifically with what does the player like, not in terms of their real behaviour, not what they think of packaging or bug testing, which is what QA will focus on. So it's not about, is the game technically correct? Will it meet the QA standards? It's more about, what do you like? Why are they liking this thing? So it's all about more psychology and game design rather than bug fixing and things like that.
Okay. So can you give us a few examples of maybe what, I don't know if you can name specific games, but kind of what you've worked on and the results of that work, and do you see that in the final product?
We do. I probably couldn't talk specifically, about things that have changed.
Yeah.
But games we've worked on have certainly went to number one on the charts, and I wouldn't say that's to do with us. It's to do with everything. Everything combined makes a good product. So we worked on Crysis 2, for example, which was number one on the charts. We worked on Brink, which went to number one. Bits of Split Second, Alien vs Predator, and all of those have been number one, I think, in the charts somewhere when at some point.
Okay.
Did usability play a part or user experience? I'd like to think so. But they were great studios as well, great developers, great designers. It was definitely a team effort.
Can I ask, how do you actually work? So how does your system go? Is it just a case of having people in, getting them to play the game and asking what they think about, or do you use, this is a loaded question because I actually know how you work, but tell me about the science part, as Jennifer Aniston once said.
Yeah, so I mean, there's so much to explain, I guess. So the easier way of doing it, and Tom asked an interesting question earlier, which I didn't answer, so sorry, Tom. You asked, do studios do this? And the answer is some do. And I think it's becoming more common. So the easier way of doing it is to bring people in and to set them in front of your game, hopefully tell them as little as possible.
Right.
Maybe even just what the tutorial, when it's finished, would be, and no more, and set them loose, and see what they do. That's one way of doing it. At the end of the session, say 20, 30 minutes, maybe an hour, you'll have a chat with them. Hey, what did you think of the game? I noticed you did this. Can you tell me why? But the big problem is, and where the science comes in, I guess, is they often lie. And so what they really think happened is not true.
Right.
So they've fabricated something in their mind, perhaps, or they remember it differently, or they want to please the person asking them because they're sitting there making the game, and they're paying them to be there. So all these things combined means that the information developers get is sometimes not what they really want.
Yeah.
They may like hearing it because it's probably positive, but it's not necessarily going to help them make the game better. So we try and bypass that in a way. We attach sensors to people's body. It's one way of doing it. So this is called biometrics or psychophysiology. We can see exactly where they react. So if you're playing an FPS and you've got a new game mechanic or a new weapon or something you're testing, we can see the exact second if they react to that. And if they do, great, we can interview them and say, why did you like that? And they'll say, well, it was due to recoil or accuracy or novelty. I've seen it in no games before. If they don't react, well, hey, that's a bigger problem, you know. So.
Do you find that they react to different at odd, unexpected things? Because I remember that I was writing a magazine piece about you, and I came to the studio and we played Call of Duty, which I'm not very good at. But my highest spike on the chart wasn't when I was shooting someone or something like that. It was when I saw a bit of blood on the ground and got completely grossed out by it. So do you find that? Do you find that the things people actually that really register for people are not always the things designers realise are going to register for
all the time? So, and the things it reveals is something about themselves. Like you're probably, maybe, I don't know if you're scared of blood or not. I'm not sure.
Oh, I am. Okay. Just my own, maybe.
I can't mention the games because some of them aren't out yet. But we saw people who, for example, we identified they were scared of heights. They reacted in a place where nobody else reacted, and we had a little chat with them afterwards, and it revealed something about themselves. So if someone is scared of heights, the designers can maybe play on that information. Yeah. So it's maybe very, very small details, but maybe that's the things that make the game believable rather than the big obvious things that everyone's going to go, well, of course it's got one of those, or of course the environment destructs when you shoot it.
You said something interesting there about audiences, so that you get people in to test it, and it turns out maybe that they're afraid of heights and they didn't realise this, and you're kind of like the littlest hobo of game development and you're helping people as you go along. But what happens if you have a very specific... So, like, I'm thinking player testing, user experience testing for a game like Dark Souls, which is meant to be punishing, and it is meant for a hardcore audience. Do you go out of your way to make sure the people you're bringing in are hardcore players? Because otherwise, if you get, you know, Mr. and Mrs. Bejeweled playing it, they're not going to have... their research is only going to tell you that the wrong kind of players don't like this kind of game. So talk to me about how you select audiences.
That is fundamental. You know, it's like the old computer acronym GIGO, you know, garbage in, garbage out. Yeah. If you get the wrong people to play your game, the information you get back is completely pointless. So yeah, if a game is meant to be punishing, we would find people who would like that genre, have bought similar games in the past, and let them play it. You know, so the information they get out is hopefully this is your core audience who you've identified. They've bought similar games in the past and have said they like it. Let's see how they get on with your title. How
do you have like large databases of players and the kind of things that they like? How does that work?
We do with two different databases. One is for adults and one's for kids, because we test some kids' games and we try and keep them separate. But on there we know how many hours per week they play. We know the consoles that they own. We know the previous games they've bought. If they've been with us in the past, we will know how they react maybe to previous games. Yeah. So where we've seen them biologically react. So that sort of information helps us build up a profile. But I know it could be so much better. So the Bartle test, for example. Richard Bartle had this test for MMO players where he says they're one of 4 types.
Right, okay.
And depending on, across many genres, they're pretty much true.
Yeah.
So I think we could have that as a foundation point and then try and build on that to identify more types of gamers.
Okay.
That's one thing we may do in the future.
So when companies approach you, you were talking about Dark Souls there as kind of a hardcore game, and you wanted to get people in to play that game who were into that that genre of game, that kind of hardcore RPG experience. Do companies ever come to you with a game and go, we want to sell this hardcore concept, expand the audience and make it more mainstream? Can you get some mothers in to come and play this hardcore RPG so we can maybe find ways of getting them to play it and expand our audience?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, we do. And that's where it gets interesting, because, you know, who doesn't want to sell more games, right? These games are really expensive to make. Of course they want to please their core audience, but they also want new fans. Who doesn't? So how do you do that? How do you do that in a way that doesn't alienate the core audience, so you're pleasing nobody?
Yeah.
So that's exactly the sort of thing we would do. We would bring in people who are going to love this game, or chances are they're going to love it. But new people, Mr. and Mrs. Bejeweled, or people who are on the fringes, or there's elements of the game that are similar to others but not quite. Yeah. So maybe it's a crossover genre, and just see how they get on and see where they have difficulty and where they react.
Cool. Okay. We've got a couple of reader questions. I'll start with the first one, which is from Steph Wu 286. They ask, are there specific genres or franchises that you feel are repeat worst offenders for bad usability?
Oh man.
Trying not to name names, I guess.
No, I'll try not to.
Unless you particularly want to.
I'm tempted to be terribly diplomatic here and say, okay, one of the things we sometimes send back to a developer, say we get 8 to 10 people playing the current build, and we'll do that multiple times, of course. One of the things we send back is a compound diagram, which is, here's a list of all issues.
Yeah. Now,
we're not saying, everyone has those issues, but across all people, here's the opportunities to improve your game. To sort of answer this question, every game has the opportunity to improve. I don't think we've seen a game yet where we've went, wow, that's pretty much perfect. Except, it's going to be controversial, Plants vs. Zombies, which I thought was pretty damn good.
Right.
I looked at it and thought, I don't know what to do. I'm not a game designer, but from a player point of view and player experience point of view, I think it did an excellent job. So apart from PVZ, everything else has the opportunity to improve. Worst offenders? It's difficult. There are certainly things. We sometimes show a video example of Haze versus Call of Duty. It was Modern Warfare 2 at the time.
Right. Okay.
And Haze has a lot of issues. So in the list of potentials to improve, it's got a lot, and we see that in quite a few FPSs.
Okay.
But I don't want to pinpoint an entire franchise, I think, and say,
that's terrible.
And also, franchises, they change developer. So although the franchise, the IP may be the same,
sure,
you will certainly get peaks and troughs in the same franchise.
Okay.
So I don't. Yeah.
So what you're saying is Infinity Ward are great, but
come on. I wouldn't say those things.
No. Okay.
But Call of Duty was very, very good indeed. We didn't work on that, I should say.
Right.
But we did do a post-mortem on it, which we often do in games. We just bring titles in, people are talking about them, and we hook people up. And there were some specific moments in Call of Duty where people just thought this was superb. And there are things they didn't actually realise, but they were peaking. For example, the ice pick at the start, where you claw down the side of a kind of a wall of ice sort of thing, and you climb up to the top, and then there's a moment where you're just following your wingman or whoever it is, and their biology, their biometric profile just dies down, and we think this is bad. They're not reacting. But we talked to them afterwards. They said this is fabulous because they know it's an opportunity to relax.
Yeah.
They can see the guy in front. They just have to follow him, so they know it's safe and where to go. All these subtle cues are saying, calm, take a breather, relax. We're going to guide you where to go. But there's no pop-ups. There's no obvious tutorials. There's no text, or there's no interruption of the player. It's subtle and really clever. So Call of Duty, very, very good. Some other FPSs, let's say, room for improvement.
Diplomatic.
I feel I have to be somehow because we.
No. That's, that's fine. So a couple of people, E.G. Vroom and Mr. Binks, wanted to know what your favourite game was from a usability standpoint. I think you mentioned Plants vs. Zombies.
Yeah.
But another question was best usability in a crap game. Which I think is interesting.
A few things to explain here, I guess, because we glossed over it at the start, which is why these terms usability and user experience. So usability is the ability to do it. That's usually things like the menus at the start and the instructions, and does the player know what the hell is going on? So that communication. User experience, on the other hand, is saying once you know what's going on, do you like it?
Right. Okay.
So you can have crap usability and a great game, which is actually quite common because user experience is way more important than usability. If you love something, you're going to completely forget that it took you 20 minutes to get through the menus. The experience of when you're in there is awesome. So a crap game with good usability, I'm struggling to think of anything that stands out. One thing that does spring to mind in general is just getting into the game. So any game that stops me getting there, where the menu system and forces me to make choices which are completely nonsensical, that will drive me mental, I think. And I do shout a lot at the TV. I do. I think I shout a lot of games in general. Don't know if it's the job or not, or just me. Right, Chris, can you think of any? Chris is as a font of all gaming knowledge, I think.
Awkward games. No, I mean, it's weird. There's a slightly different answer, isn't it? But the game which always comes to mind when I think about usability and user experience is PN3 or PN03, the Capcom GameCube game. You don't know it because it sold 15,000 copies around the world. But it's the whole point of that game. It was ahead of the curve in that kind of Dark Souls thing. The whole point of the game was to be awkward to use. So the controls are slightly awkward. You move very awkwardly, and you can't move and shoot, for example, at the same time. It's like you are really. And when you first start to play it, you think, oh my god, this is broken. And a load of people get to the end of the first level and go, this is broken. It looks really pretty, but it just doesn't work. And the actual learning curve, the challenge of the game isn't the enemies and the bosses. It's getting to grips with the controls so that you can make your movements with these horrible controls as elegant as the character on screen is. It sounds like I've got Stockholm Syndrome, but I actually do think that's what they intended. And I love the game. But I think that's a game where it's great because the whole challenge is the usability and the user experience. Sort of, it ties into why it's actually fun. I don't think many other people should copy that, but no.
And I think that can work well in horror games where the bad usability increases the sense of tension or suspense, or oh my god, I'm about to get attacked and I can't remember the key combination and get this thing out. So the poor usability can be a benefit.
It's weird. With horror games, there is almost like a barrier where you can be bad. Your usability can be bad on purpose up to a point where people will no longer accept it. And the thing I'm thinking of is Doom 3 with the flashlight. You could either shoot people or you could see where you were going. And the reason why I don't think that worked is because everyone in the real world has this technology called sticky tape, so they could tape the flashlight to the gun and they'd be absolutely good to go. And that game it hinged on a mechanic which everyone who played it rejected in grounds of plausibility, which is a strange grounds to reject something when you're playing a game on a space station which is being overrun by demons. But that's really interesting as well, isn't it? It's sort of like all of the different ways audiences are approaching a game. That must be pretty interesting.
It's strange. Back to that compound diagram we send back, we make a list of all the issues that would break the immersion in a game. And they are bizarre. They are not the things that most developers will think about. It's stuff that you mentioned. It's like, well, in the real world, this would happen. Or I noticed this small... I don't want to mention details because it's probably pinpoint the game. But there are small details that just completely break immersion. And most developers are like, really? That small issue is bringing them out of my game? It's like, yeah, that's what's stuck in their head.
I think I know what you're talking about. I think, without mentioning the game, never put a Coke machine in your game unless it actually works. I think isn't that...
That wasn't what I was thinking of, but those examples are perfectly true as well. It's things that they believe should work, and they try it, and it doesn't, and go, well, what's going on here? If that doesn't work, I'm out of the world. So at some point in the future, once these games are released, I'll come back and be able to talk about, the very inconsequential details that just break people's immersion in video games.
Yeah. Knowing what you know about both user experience and usability, are you not tempted to collate all this information and make the perfect game and rule the world?
I was writing about this last night, where there was a More 4 program on television for the last 3 weeks called What is a Masterpiece?
Right.
I don't know if you saw this, or what makes a masterpiece, and they looked at movies, they looked at music, and they looked at art. Fine art, and they said, why are some of these excellent and superb and why are some crap? What is it? Why do people react? And they didn't look at video games at all, but all the methods they use, the stuff that we use, the biometrics and eye tracking and all that sort of stuff, they tried to see how do people feel when they look at certain aspects. So we're getting there. We know what doesn't work and what does work in certain genres.
Yeah.
At some point it would be great to try and compile that in some way. But it depends on the art style, it depends on the player. To try and say this is the perfect game, man, it's so difficult.
You could be the Heston of...
That's not a bad comparison in a way. It is taking something which is aesthetic and subjective, like food or art, and saying, look, there is a science here. And so far, we would certainly say that it's been ignored. And in fact, I posed the question when I was writing this article last night, saying, is it being ignored on purpose? So the people who make games, do they know that these scientific methods exist to try and prove that their game designs work? But they're going, I don't want to know the result, because if I feed my game through this process and you see no one's reacting to my game design, do you want to know or do you not? But as game players, of course, we want the best game possible. So,
do you get a lot of resistance internally? I know this is a tricky question, but so designers often are very instinctual people. They instinctively know what they like, and they instinctively know what they think is right for their game. And then you guys come in from the outside, and you go, "We've got all of these people to play it, and everyone hates the way aiming works or something." So, do you find people? Do you find a lot? That must be a hard sell to have that conversation with people.
It is, and it's getting easier as time goes on. But one thing we have found is that there's no set pattern for who's for it and who's against it. You'll have people who are the head of studios who will love it or hate it. You'll have producers or artists or people in QA from the top to the bottom. But it's not the same pattern. So it's just finding those people who are really for it and saying, well, look, I'm going to make this game. It's going to cost a bucket load of money, and let's get as much information as possible to try and make it good. I think what surprises me is a load is spent on QA. The QA is really expensive, sometimes millions of dollars. So the game can be technically correct. It'll not crash on you, but completely rubbish. But no money, very little spent on what we do, the player side. Understanding why would the player like this.
Are you brought in early enough in the process? Because I mean, imagine if you come in the last 3 months, you go, "Oh my god, everything is terrible." There's only so they're going to have to pick their battles out of what they fix.
That's absolutely true. I think that's a battle we try and fight as well. And certainly, more recently, we're working on projects almost in the very, very beginning. And that's great, because you can rule out the most obvious things, saying, we've seen that 100 times before, it never works for this reason, please don't spend your money making it, because it's a waste, go and build something else. So I think you can do things even before code's written, even before you see anything. Principles. You were saying this book, Tom, this book, the Bible existed. The Bible of game design. They're not even game design, it's the Bible of what's in people's heads, the player experience book. That would be useful, I think.
Yeah, okay. How do you think it's progressing in general? Are companies coming more around to the idea of usability, I guess? And I think so. But I mean, back to Chris's question as well, it's like there's still some resistance because we're not game designers, so that maybe some people will think, well, what do they know about making games? But we know about people, and that's the bit we're bringing into it. And so ultimately it's the game designer's job to say, do I want to change this information? So we'll send it back and say, here's what you can do to make it better. Here's an opportunity to improve the game. But ultimately they can say, you know what? No. As a game designer, I'm going to stick with my guns here. The fact that 100 people have said, I can't figure that thing out and I hate it, you know what? We're going to go ahead. Or that's an obvious case. It's usually on the fence either way. Yeah, okay.
But it's getting easier.
Tutorials and stuff like that are kind of the first thing, I guess, in most games that gamers experience. So how do you feel like are they getting better in general, do you think?
No. Not at all. Tutorials are interesting. In a lot of cases, they're the last thing made. Because you make the game and then you go, what did we make? Now let's make the tutorial which describes that set of game mechanics. So it's typically rushed or very little attention is put on it. And the other thing is, it's often made by the people who know the game very well. So they'll say, well, here's the 10 things the player needs to know, let's just step them through it and job done. But that doesn't always work. How they approach the problem, because they're so immersed in that culture for 2 years, how they describe that information to the player isn't always the best way of doing it. So we sometimes say, we've never done this, I should say, that somebody else should write the tutorial. Somebody completely different who didn't make the game should introduce it from a fresh perspective. And maybe some studios do that. We'd love to hear from them if you do that. But in most cases, I don't think so. It's really frustrating. It's the first experience. You've just spent, £40 on a new game. Yay, got it home. Oh man, what's this? Poor usability, getting into the game, the menu structure, what it makes you decide, explaining the rules.
Do you ever get involved in kind of like the game manual side of things? Because that's kind of really dropped off.
That's old school. Game manual? What are you talking about?
I know. For some of our younger listeners, these were printed words you used to get in game packaging telling you how to play the game. So, no, because that side of things is now almost completely declined to the point where everything's reliant on in-game tutorials.
Really good question. I'd love to see a remake of the game manual. And maybe that is a tutorial. Some people will say the tutorial is the manual. But I'd love to see that rethought completely. What does someone want to know when they see this game for the first time? What do they really need to know?
Yeah.
And most games just batter the player over the head. here is the 6 pages of instructions we're going to give you, and it's in 10-point text, and you're going to remember it all. No, they're not even going to read it and remember it. And you think that's a made-up example. It's actually not. That's real.
Wow.
So there's some really terrible stuff out there.
Can you think of good and bad examples of tutorials? Someone was saying to me recently that Super Mario Brothers has the best tutorial in the world because you don't even realise you're playing it. You start running and there is a block with a question mark and you jump and you've just learned how to jump and how to hit blocks. And so sort of the game goes on from that point. But can you think of any really good ones and any really bad ones? No, not necessarily among the things you've worked on because you probably can't talk about that. But
no, I think we did write about it once where in Call of Duty, the pit was an example of a great tutorial because it was not only was immersive and got you into playing the game, but taught all the mechanics. People made it a competition. They were posting on YouTube like how good they were at the tutorial. How often do you get that? A tutorial that's replayed and people are advertising it, and the game developers must have been loving that. So Call of Duty again does things very, very well indeed. Back to Chris's point, Super Mario Brothers, Super Mario Galaxy came with a DVD with instructions and a wall chart.
Yes.
But that's another interesting thing, isn't it? Because Mario has been around for 30 odd years. I probably got that number wrong, but he's been around for a very long, all of my life basically, and I'm 33. And over time, so in the first game, he could jump on people, and you had a speed up and slow down thing mechanic. He could dash a little bit to jump further. But now in the new Mario games, there is like wall springs, there is a triple jump, there is the long jump. There are all Mario, which seems so simple. His rule set has just completely expanded, and at the same time, controllers have expanded. Someone once told me how many buttons there were on a DualShock, and there are a lot. So is it the nature that these things are just becoming more important because games have so much more bandwidth to kind of challenge you on?
Well, yeah, I'm not a designer, so I'm going to back off a little bit. But I do think it's probably true that the more buttons you have, game designers may find ways of filling them up.
Gas expands to fill a vacuum kind of idea.
Yeah, and for the more casual player at least, they don't enjoy a lot of these the more difficult features. So if I was playing Super Mario Galaxy with my girlfriend, she'd be doing some of the more general things like collecting stars.
Yeah.
When it comes to jumping, the controller passes to me immediately. And in playtest last week, we saw the exact same thing with couples in playing a game. I can't say what it is, but it was 2 people playing a game. And when it came to the more difficult or the intricate bits where you had the time, or have core game mechanics, or core game, muscle movement, it was passed straight to the boyfriend, and then the girlfriend would take the controller again. So
that's interesting because how do you then make sure that you're providing good feedback? Sorry, I'm completely.
We're off already.
How do you make sure you're providing good feedback without eroding any sense of challenge? So, like BioShock, this is announced, isn't it? 1999 mode has been announced.
It has, yeah.
Okay, good. I'm not breaking anything. So, BioShock Infinite has 2 modes. You could play the game as as the normal mode, which is for the guy who maybe I remember talking to Ken Levine about it. He said they want a guy to go in a shop, maybe plays 2 games a year. He has 4 kids, and he has an hour every night to play a game, and he just wants to get into it and get through it and see everything. That's the standard game, and they have difficulty settings for that. It's like hard, easy, medium.
Don't even start me on those settings.
But they also have 1999 mode, where all of your character customization choices are permanent, and each choice you make locks out another. So you can really get yourself in difficult situations. You can have put all of your experience into being very good with a certain kind of gun, and then you'll be in situations where the ammo for that gun is rationed. And so this is a game design for people who like that feeling of being painted into corners. And as a usability thing, there must still be work for you to do on that, because they're aiming for something really hard like Dark Souls, but they still want basic usability to work for it.
I think in that case at least they've identified a separate mode where the player can choose, no, I do want that experience, let's go for 1999 mode. And
but what happens when the designer just says to you, I just wanted this bit to be hard, I wanted this bit to be difficult? One
of the things we sometimes say to developers is to quantify the experience. So there was one game where the developer said this is meant to be a hard game, and we said, okay, it is hard. In fact, how many times do you want someone to die in the first level? And they said, I don't know, about 3 times. And we said, fine, it's 19. And we showed videos of this happening, and they were like, oh, that's too many. So if we just said it's too hard, they would say that's okay. But when it came to quantifying it and then showing the videos, they were like, yeah, we don't want that happening. so it's getting them to set realistic boundaries of what they mean by hard. Everyone says easy, medium, and hard. What is that? Come on.
In your experience, do you know which one, when they are, because I'm assuming the way they balance difficulty is one is the one they actually build, and then they up and down it for the other ones. They raise the challenge or lower the challenges for the other ones. Do you know how people approach this?
Probably lots of quantitative testing. So they'll get metrics out of the console, the PC, I guess, during playtesting. Not art style, but different type of playtesting. And that'll be for balancing. Is your problem that the words are so ambiguous that you have nothing when you start a game, you have nothing to, you don't know what normal is in this game, so you have nothing to kind of compare hard and. I think it's exactly what it is. And some games do try and qualify it, I guess, what easy, medium, hard means. But I'm guessing wondering, why do we need that at all? But maybe it's for 1999 mode. Maybe it's fair to exist. A question for the listeners, perhaps. Why do we need easy, medium, hard? Does anyone choose easy or hard, and who are these people? And
I sometimes choose easy. Don't mind saying.
What games would you choose easy on?
I choose easy on lots of games. The only games that no, it's tricky, isn't it? It's tricky. But then Dark Souls, though. Have you played Dark Souls?
I haven't. No, but it sounds like something. Is it like Witcher? Like kind of, we're going to punish you and.
Yeah, it's probably it's seen as. I mean, it was a game that was sold on how punishing it is. Isn't that right? There was sort of like
both that and. What are we talking about? Dark Souls and Demon Souls.
That's right. So I'd be really interested to get your perspective on them, because these are games which I think have kind of confused the rest of the industry a little bit at the moment. There, where games in 2012 are so much going towards rewarding the player a lot and allowing them to get through and making sure that you never stick anything too difficult in their way. And then the game which really captures a lot of people's imaginations is a game which does none of those things, which doesn't even explain its own systems. So part of the fun of this game is finding out the way things work and the rippling after effects of your choices when you don't know what choices you're actually making. And people seem to love that. I was talking to Simon Parkin the other day, and he talked for an hour about how much he loved this. The fact that he didn't know what he was meant to be doing.
Okay, so one thing I'm going to mention is back to Bartle's 4 types. So he said you got socializers, achievers, killers, and explorers. So the people who made that game are obviously going for a specific market. People who love exploring, they love finding out the game rules, they don't mind getting stuck. That is for them. But for the other 3 types, they'll probably hit it. So as long as if a company knows who it's aiming at and delivers that experience, then that's not a problem. It's only a problem. Tom raised the question of what if they want a new audience? What if they want to bring in the socializers, the opposite end of the scale? You're going to have a problem there, I would imagine. So knowing your market is a good thing. It only happens when you want to say this game's for everyone, and that's a difficult situation.
Yeah, okay. Are you able to sit there playing games in your spare time and just enjoy them for what they are? Or
No, not at all.
Writing mental reports in your head?
It's terrible. It's worse than mental notes. I sit with a notepad beside me.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I shouldn't say this. I was playing Uncharted 3.
Okay.
Should I start this conversation?
Go for it.
Yeah, I think the wounds have healed.
I mean, I loved the first one. I could gush about the second one, and I didn't so much like the third one. Actually, I played it at home, and I wish I had myself wired up to the biometric, devices that we use, because it is an awesome experience, and as a movie-like journey, it was great. But for the first time, I felt as if it was just too cleverly designed, almost. Like nothing was by accident. I knew where all the treasures were going to be, because maybe a corridor was a little bit too long, and I went, they wouldn't do that, by accident. There's something down there, and 9 times out of 10. There was, and that really spoiled it for me.
Yeah.
So, and there's many examples, but I don't know how you feel about Uncharted 3, but it was a step too far for me.
That strikes me as being a game which has been user tested and focus tested quite a lot, actually. Uncharted, I would imagine. I don't know about the way Naughty Dog worked, but I imagine the kind of experience they're going for. It's almost. Do you think that is almost the danger of too much testing in too many ways, in that you're seeing something where everything is way too instinctive, where everything is way too managed?
Definitely. I think the designer still has to put down some element of creative stamp and creative control, and I'm sure they wanted people to finish that game in the same way that you finish a movie, and I think they delivered that. But for people wanting a game, probably like myself, I was a bit surprised at how movie-like it was like. And the thing is, that should have been the exact game for me. A very little time. I want to finish games if I start them. It should have been tick, 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 but it felt flat somehow. You know?
Are you saying you'd give it an 8 out of 10 because that's going to be a problem?
I'd probably give it less, to be honest. I don't know if I enjoyed it. I remember all the standout moments,
right.
And I'm sure my body would have reacted and went, wow, that's awesome, and the bit on the plane, all the things like that on the boat, on the ship when it goes outside, I would have went, wow. But as a game, I'm not sure if I interacted enough. The interaction was the problem, right. Not the experience. Okay, there's another term we can throw in, interaction design. And what do you actually have to do? We could break that. You talk about the mental steps, the challenge mentally, the challenge physically, the button pushing and stuff like that. And it missed that for me. Great experience, interaction, and cognitive involvement. Don't know, not quite there.
Okay.
And I'd love to draw our biometric storyboard of that game. If we get time, we might go back and do it and compare 2 and 3, because I think 2 will win.
Yeah.
But hey.
Okay. How's the rise of things like Kinect and Move and the Wii kind of affected what you do, and how is it different to normal games?
I love that term.
Trying to find a
politically correct term for it.
Not that I'm biased against.
No. So what do you think of that, Jimmy?
What do you think of those terrible Kinect things?
Not much has changed. The key difference is we can't put sensors on your body because you're moving around so much, your body reacts anyway. So we just rely on normal methods, if I can say that. Observing people, interviewing them afterwards, that sort of stuff. At the start, we did see core gamers have more of a problem with controlling it than casual gamers. Yeah. So we worked on. I think I can mention this because they're released and it's been published. We worked on some stuff for Blitz Game Studios, like Fantastic Pets and U-Star 2. And at the start, Kinect wasn't out at all. And we brought people in, and the core gamers were much more frustrated. They were like, "Oh, just give me a joypad. I know how to do this. I want to push left." And the casual gamers were like, "Cool, I can control this without a joypad. That's awesome." So I'm sure that's changed since. I hope the core gamers have gotten used to it. We do speak, in fact, how can I say? Phrase this delicately. For Move. A lot of people seem to like the principle, but the games that use Move, that's their problem. And it's probably the same with Kinect. They're like, the technology is awesome, right? You can control stuff just by moving around or by speaking to it. Great. But the games so far that have built upon that technology are not maybe as good as they could be.
Right.
For certain audiences. If you want to play Zumba Fitness, go for it, that's fine. But if you want a Call of Duty style experience with Move or with Kinect, then it's not there yet. So.
Do you think it will be at some point?
Yeah, I'd say so. Yeah, I think so.
So is that the future? A controller's out?
No, I don't think so. I think there's still something about tangible computing and touching. I can't see that going away. But I certainly do see it being augmented with the other senses your body has. Proprioception, the fact that your body's moving in space and you know where you are, and using those things. Why not? Eye tracking. Yeah. How do you feel? Breathing. Bring it on. It's going to be great. But it's not going to happen this year. No. I think.
Chris, have you got any other?
No, I'm done. I'm done.
Cool. Okay. Well, it seems like a good place to wrap it up then. Thanks very much for coming in, Christian Donlan.
Thank you.
And to our special guest, Graham McAllister from Player Research. Thanks very much for your time. Thanks for coming in. Thank you for listening. We'll see you next week.